Hi, I'm Adam Summer. You're listening to the Yerushalmi Talk podcast with the support of the Yeshivat Devar Yerushalayim in Har Nof, Jerusalem. This is Kilayim, Chapter 2, Halacha 1. We're getting into how do you nullify seed. Now, let's say you have seed that you're going to throw onto the field. In other words, this is going to be planting seed. And you purchased it at the shuk and you find a mixture in there. How do you clean it? Now, it's going to turn out that it's Doraita and it's a halacha Moshe Sinai. That seed is going to get nullified in 1/24th of the amount. There's one opinion that it's going to be 1/25th of the amount, but actually Rabbi Kanievsky is going to be explaining that it's really two different halachot. I'll explain that when we get into it, but it's basically 1 in 24. Now, there's a few things to get into this shiur, and in order to understand this halacha Moshe Sinai on this cleaning the seed in 1 in 24, we have to understand a few things. First of all, there's a standard measurement of a measurement of seed. That's going to be a sa'ah, okay? And the sa'ah is going to be made up of 24 parts. Wow, right? We have 1 in 24 is going to be a rova, right? That's going to be the parts are made up of rovaim. And we see here, why is the sa'ah broken up into 24 parts? We see because the sa'ah is made up of 24 parts. We see this halacha Moshe Sinai that seed is going to be cleaned up in 24 parts, in 1 in 24 parts. And there's a few things about this, okay? The sa'ah of seed is going to be planted on a Beit Seah of land. A Beit Seah of land is equivalent to 50 by 50 amos. And if you're planting grain, that's going to be the qualification, the minimum qualification to have a grain field, the halachic status of a grain field. Why do you care if you have a grain field? Well, you care about it if it's the 6th year and you're worried about when you can be plowing up until, when you can be watering and working the ground. Also, you care about it because you want to know, well, how far can I plant other things next to it? Because I have a grain field, right? If you're planting less than that, it's going to be counting like a garden. Now, what's going to be happening with other kinds of fields? Well, you have orchards. That we covered in Masechet Shvius, Chapter 1. And that is going to be 2 Beit Seah to make an orchard. And over there, it's going to be either 3 trees or 10 trees. And why? Because those are going to take up a lot of space, right? If you're planting 1 fig tree, they get to be very large. So you're trying to maximize the amount of nutrition that the plant gets on the land. And in order to maximize the amount of nutrition for the amount of land that you have, you can fit 3 trees on 2 Beit Seah and maximize the amount of nutrition. And if you're going to try to maximize the amount of nutrition that the land utilizes, you're going to be using 10 trees rowed out in 2 rows of 5. But that is going to make where you're taking up most of the nutrition of the land. Now, if you're planting a Beit Seah of seed like the wheat, well, wheat is going to be a smaller plant than a tree. And not only that, we're talking about trying to get a dispersion of the seed so you used up all of the seed, so your sa'ah of seed is used up, and you're trying to make sure that you covered the ground and you're maximizing nutrition within the field. And, you know, if you're only doing, say, 23 rovaim instead of 24 out of 24, which would be a sa'ah, well, then you've left some stuff on the table, right? You've minimized the amount of utilization from the land. The land is not fully used. And you want to make sure you have rational farms where you're fully utilizing it. Now, in order to understand Chapter 2, Halacha 1, there's a few things you have to understand. The halacha is going to be talking about 3 kinds of seed. It's really going to be split into 3 different categories. There's going to be garden seed, like if you have the intention to grow for carrots or turnips, and you really just care about the tuber. You care about the edible part that is the root that's under the ground. Okay, and the idea about these garden plants is that, well, in order to cover the Beit Seah of land, you might only need one calf of seed. So a calf is going to be 16% of a seah. So you might only need, say, 1/6 of the seed in order to cover this amount of land. Why? Because the plants grow to be very large. And again, like if we're planting trees, well, those trees are very large, right? But certainly, a turnip plant, while it's going to be a lot larger than a stalk of barley, it's going to be a lot smaller than a tree. So if you're trying to cover the field with, turnip plants, that's going to fall into the category of garden seeds. Then you have the second category. That's going to be grain seeds. And the Mishnah is going to be talking about grain seeds and kitniyot in the same category. So if you have peas and you have barley seeds, that's going to be at the same rate. Why? Because basically the same rate is going to mean like this, that if you have one seah of seed, it's going to cover and use up all of the seed to cover the one seah of the land, the one Beit Seah. So that's going to be that. And then you have this high category, this fast high category. That's the third category. That's going to be something like flaxseed. And flaxseed is going to be sown in a way that's 3 times more dense than you would do for this middle category like barley, wheat, or legumes and kitniyot. So in the flaxseed, you're trying not necessarily to grow it for to make bread or something like that. You're trying to grow it for fiber. You care about the fiber because that's how you made linen and clothes. And so you really pack it in. The seeds are very, very small, by the way, but you pack it in, you make it very dense, and it grows, and you get a lot of this fiber. So you're not necessarily even trying to grow it in a nutritious way. You just want the fiber. And so you're going to pack it in 3 times more dense than the wheat. Now, the rule that's going to be coming up here, and it took me a couple of times to go through this to understand the rule. The rule is like this. The rule is that if you have within the same category, if you have within this medium category 2 different plants, well, then it's going to nullify 1 in 24. If you have 2 different plants within the high fast category like flax, maybe chia seed would be something like that as well, well, that's going to nullify in 1 in 24 as well. And if you had something like the garden seeds, that's also going to nullify in 1 in 24, but they have to be the same category. And as we get into part 2 of the shiur, you're going to see that when you mix the low category with the medium category, then it's not going to nullify in 1 in 24. And if you mix the medium category and the high category, it's not going to nullify in 1 in 24. Now, how are you going to nullify these seeds? Normally, you're either going to pull out the seeds, that's going to be the difference, or you're going to add to it. And one of the other considerations about this is that we're talking about seeds that somebody purchased from the shuk, from the seed seller, and they didn't purposefully put these seeds in, these other seeds in. It's an accident, okay? Now, the Rambam is going to be saying that as long as you can't tell the difference, but when you plant these seeds, that there's 2 different species of crops growing in this field, it's going to be okay. Now, certainly he's going to agree that, you have this nullification issue of 1 in 24, but the key idea that the Rambam has is that you can't tell the difference that the field is growing really 2 different crops. And I think the Rambam's point is that if you're dealing with more than 1 in 24, that, by the way, is just over 4%, is 4.16%. So if you're dealing with something like, say, 6% of the field being another crop, that's going to be visually distinctive. And I think the Rambam's point is that something like 4% or under is not going to be visually distinctive. Now, one of the key points is we're dealing with accidents here, right? This is where there's an accidental thing where some seed poured into this thing, and what do you do about it, okay? Now, in dealing with this accident, we're not dealing with something that's purposeful, where you have a dodgy, bad, dishonest seller who purposefully is going to be mixing in foreign seed, maybe cheaper seed, to make his more expensive, clean wheat seed look nicer, right? What's he going to be doing? Well, if he does it on purpose, that's stealing. It's theft. You're not allowed to do it. And all of these rules are not going to apply for the guy who's purposefully doing it. These rules and leniencies that we're going to be getting into are going to be dealing with accidental cases, things, just sort of poured into the seed, or it got mixed up because you had this container and then you emptied it out and you used new seed, a different kind of plant in the same container, and maybe there's a few leftover seeds. That's what we're dealing with. We're not dealing with dishonest people trying to cheat the system. So that's going to basically be in a nutshell about what we're going to be getting into. And let me explain the Mishnah. So again, we're dealing with this prohibition of Kilayim, and you're not allowed to mix and sow a mixture of seeds. And, the question is going to be really, what happens if you find these seeds in your planting seeds from another mixture? How do you do it? How do you mix? How do you deal with it so that you can sow? How do you nullify it? How do you clean the pile? So the Mishnah says that any sa'ah of seed in which there's a rova. Now, a rova is going to be this 1/24th measurement of the sa'ah, right? And that comes up to 4% of the size of the sa'ah, or of seeds of a different kind. So any sa'ah of seed in which there's a rova of seeds of different kind, if one wishes to sow the sa'ah, he must reduce the percentage of foreign seed until it comprises less than 1/24th of the mixture. So the idea is that you're not just taking it down to 1/24th, you're trying to get it down underneath there. So if you have a minority species and it's going to be 4%, 4.16% of this mixture of seed, then the seed cannot be sown until the concentration of the foreign species is reduced to less than 1/24th. Now, how do you do that? The Rambam explains that you either remove some of the foreign seed from the mixture or you add more of the major seed to the mixture. That's going to be the easiest way to do it. And what happens when you add to it, right? So if you actually lower the amount of foreign seed, well, then you end up with less than a sa'ah of seed. That means that you're not going to fully cover your Beit Seah of land, which means that you've left part of it unused. So what do, right? You take it underneath this 4% measure, this one rova measure, and you add a little bit of wheat to it, and that'll make sure that you've nullified it and you've ended up where you can throw it. Now, what happens when you're just leaving it at 1/24? That means that you have 23 parts of the majority seed that you want, let's say wheat, and you have one part that's going to be the one rova, right? That's 1/24 parts, 4%. And basically, let's say it's going to be legumes, or let's say it's going to be barley. But the idea is that you can't throw it as is. And one of the key ideas that this is pointing out is that, are they going to add up to nullify this? That's going to be a question. And the way this Mishnah looks like, and we're going to get into who is the author of this, it looks like, wait a second, you have to lower that amount, you have to add to it in order to get back up to this sa'ah of seed that you can fully cover this land. Again, you don't want to undercover the land because you lose the halachic status of the sadeh of land, right? You lose the halachic status of having a grain field, and you want the grain field. And if you change it so that you're not having it, let's say it's going to be the 6th year of Shvius. Well, you're going to be limited on when you can plow and how you water it, when you water it. Also, you're going to be limited in what kind of work that you're doing to clear rocks and to clear weeds and things like that. Also, one of the other problems is what happens if you want to plant another kind of grain next to it. Your setback is going to be different. So we want to make sure that if we're really doing a grain field, we're really doing a grain field, halachic grain field. So that's why we care. And also, there's an economic part, right? You have your land, you own it. You want to fully utilize your land so that you're using the nutrition in your land and there's not gaps in it. It's going to make it harder to sow if you're doing it with gaps. It's going to be harder to harvest. So you want these rational fields. and the start of a rational field is getting to a Beit Seah of seed. So if you want to sow this, you have to reduce the percentage of foreign seed until it comes up to less than 24th of the mixture, and then it means that you have to add a little bit of the majority seed, and then basically it's going to nullify the minority seed, and you're going to still cover this amount of land. Now, the Mishnah says that Rabbi Yossi says he must remove the entire quantity of foreign seed from the mixture. This is a big hiddush, and it continues and says, regardless of whether the rova of foreign seed is comprised of one species or two or more species, the seah may not be sown. So Rabbi Yossi has a big hiddush here, okay? And where is this coming from? He's saying that there's going to be a Maris Ayin issue if you're ending up planting two different things in the same field. People are going to notice it. And they're going to think, well, wait a second, maybe he's doing this because he really wants the foreign seed there. He's really playing a game, and he actually wants this mixture there, and he actually wants the other plant. So Rabbi Yossi says that once you reach more, amount greater than this rova, so more than this 4% amount, you have to remove all of it. But the point of Rabbi Yossi is to say, wait a second, but if you have less than that, let's say you have, say, 2%, so that's going to be half a rova, okay? So that's going to be 1 in 48 parts, okay? So if you have half of that, like 2%, he's not going to make you remove all of it. He's only going to make you remove all of it once it comes up to this magical number of the rova. And again, keep in mind, this nullification, this 1 in 24 parts, this is all going to be a halacha Moshe L'Sinai. This is all going to be a Doraita thing. So he's going to be saying that once you've reached more than this amount, you're going to have to remove all of it. Basically, you're going to have to take it out. You're going to have to add this, rova plus a little bit that you've removed to get back to this seah of land. You don't want to mix it. And he's basically saying until you fix it, you can't sow it. So basically, says the Rosh Hashanah, is that he's saying that it makes no difference whether the rova of foreign seed is comprised of one species or more. For instance, if you have half a rova of barley, that's going to be 1 in 48 parts, and half a rova of spelt, and they get mixed together in the 23 rovim of the majority of wheat, then are they going to combine to nullify it with this 1 in 24 amount? And Rabbi Yossi is saying no. He's saying that you have a problem with the rova. You have to take out all of the foreign seed, eliminate it, add in the majority seed of the wheat, and then plant it. So Rabbi Shimon is going to have a dispute. So you see here the starting of a three-way dispute. And really, what is this three-way dispute? This is basically getting into, hey, if I have multiple species inside of this mixture, are they going to combine to nullify? Now, where else do you see in the halacha something that can combine and also be nullified? You see that in the mikveh. We know a mikveh is required to have 40 lugin of water. And the halacha is that if you have 39 lugin of water and 1 lugin of apple juice, as long as you can't see the color, it's going to qualify. And then also, so it's going to add up to be 40. Now, what about pourable mud? Well, Rabbi Akiva is going to say that this 39 plus 1 is going to add up to have the halachic status of a mikveh. But if you were to be touching the pourable mud, would you be purified of this? In the mikveh, no. You have to not be touching it, but it will still add to the quantity. And that's really the question that we're getting at. Hey, if you have 1 in 24 parts, and within this 24 parts, right, there's 2 different seeds, are these, since they're a minority, right, it's less than 1/24th amount. It's actually 1/48th amount. It's 2%. So we know that there's a problem, halacha Moshe L'Sinai, at 4.16%. Well, what if you have, this one's 2%, this one's 2%, you have 2 different species, are they going to add up and nullify each other and then add up to this amount to be able to be a Beit Seah where you can throw it? That's going to be the question. So Rabbi Shimon says that they did not say that a rova of foreign seed prohibits a seah unless the entire rova is comprised of one kind. So basically he rejects this notion that Rabbi Yossi is saying that you can have within this one rova many kinds, and that they're going to be nullified because they're smaller than 1 in 48, or 1 in 24, and that they're going to be nullified. So he rejects this notion that different kinds can be counted together and added up to make up this rova that's going to end up adding together with this 23 rovaim to make the seah and to make it so that you could plant it. His view is different. He's saying if you have a rova, only a rova of one species is going to forbid this mixture. So what he's saying is if you have half a rova of barley, half a rova of spelt, and you're trying to sow wheat, he's saying that they're going to combine, it's going to be nullified, and it's going to count that you can throw the seed, it's nullified because it's a minority. He's saying that this 1/24th amount, as long as you have if you have multiple seeds within it, different kinds, it's going to add up. It's less than 1/24th, and you can end up throwing the entire Beit Seah, this entire Seah seed on this Beit Seah. The Beit Seah, again, is 50 amos by 50 amos. That, by the way, is going to correspond to half the size of the temple courtyard. And by the way, keeping track, the orchard, which is going to be 2 Beit Seah, what's going to have the halachic status of the orchard? 2 Beit Seah. That corresponds with 50 amos by 100 amos, which is the size of the temple courtyard. Very deep agadic stuff that Hashem made it so that trees and seed is going to be corresponding to maximize nutrition. That's going to be corresponding to the temple courtyard. Very deep. Anyway, the point is that Rabbi Shimon is basically going to be saying, yes, you can, because these multiple species are going to be adding up to nullify each other. But the key is going to be if it's one species, that's going to be where you have the problem. Now, the sages are going to say that any kind of seed that is Kilayim with the major component of the Seah that combines to comprise a rova that prohibits the Seah. So the sages are going to be agreeing with the Tanakhama that 2 different species can combine to prohibit the mixture with one condition, that both species must be considered Kilayim with the major component of the Seah. So if only one of the foreign species is going to be Kilayim with the major component, the other one's not, the Seah can be sown without reducing the amount of foreign seed. Now, there's a disagreement between the Tanakhama and the sages. So the sages are going to be differing, and they're going to be saying that in a case such as the following, where you have the majority component of the Seah being barley, and this becomes mixed with oats and spelt, which together is going to comprise a rova. Again, within this rova, this 1/24th part, you have the mixture now of 2 species. That's going to be oats and spelt. And he's basically going to be saying that although spelt and barley are Kilayim with each other, oats and barley are not. And again, we saw this in chapter 1, Halacha 1 of Kilayim, that we saw with these pairs, right? We saw these pairs of things together. And what the sages are saying, their sages are saying that the oats are disregarded and only the spelt is going to be regarded as foreign seed. Why? Because that's dealing with the pairs. And the halacha, by the way, is going to be going by the sages, right? So basically what they're going to be saying is, look, we know that 2 of these grains are going to be varieties of each other. And so that's not going to be counted as foreign seed. Only the one that's actually going to be Kilayim within these sets of pairs is going to be something that is going to prohibit. Now, the Mishnah is going to move on, and it's going to get into a qualification of the law. It's going to say, regarding what case are these words said? In other words, when is the critical amount of foreign seed going to be where it's going to forbid the mixture of the rova? And this is, again, now we're getting into this thing about the 3 types of seed, right? We have the slow, the medium, and the fast, and this is where we're going to be getting into it. So it says, when the mixture involves grain and grain, so again, that's going to be medium, kitniot and kitniot, that again is going to be medium, grain and kitniot, or kitniot and grain, again, both of those are going to be in this medium category. And the Mishnah continues, says, in truth they said, and by the way, every time it says in truth they said, that's going to be a halacha Moshe Sinai, and it's a clue that it's something that is going to be a very basic thing in Judaism. It's indicating a law given orally by Moshe Rabbeinu at Har Sinai. It also, by the way, can sometimes be a rabbinical law that's indisputably clear and unquestionable, just like a law that came from Har Sinai. So this is talking about the next part. So in truth, they said garden plants whose seeds are not eaten, so those are again going to be our carrots and our turnips, that become mixed with other seeds, combined to forbid the mixture when they amount to 1/24th of what falls, in other words, what's usually sown in them in a Beit Seah, even if this is much less than a rova. So the idea is that now we have this other category, right? It's talking about garden plants in garden plants, right? So the problem that we're going to be getting into part 2 of this year is what happens if you mix this slow category like garden plants, which, the plants are very big. And again, to plant this Beit Seah space, this 50 by 50 amos of space, that you have to use a smaller amount of seed to cover it. Why? Because the plants are very big, and you don't need as much seed to cover the area. So the idea here is that, yes, if it's within the same category, like turnips get mixed in with carrots, that's going to get nullified in 1/24th. But it has to be within the same category. And if you have a mixture between, say, grain and garden plants, that's going to be where you have an issue. That's why the Mishnah is trying to keep this stuff together. Now, the idea here is that the Mishnah is stating that if you have a seah of seed, like wheat, and that's going to contain a mixture of garden plants equal to 1/24th of the amount of seed that would normally be thrown in, then the seed can't be planted unless you lower the amount of garden plant that's going to be in there. So why do you have to lower it? Because again, it's going to be taking up more space, and again, it's going to be very visible that you have many species growing in this field. So if you have wheat, majority wheat, and you have some turnips that got mixed into it, you can't just say like, okay, well, it's nullified in 1/24, and even just a little bit less than 1/24, because the way the seeds work are going to be different. These are going to take up a lot of space, and so you have to end up lowering the amount in a way and adding more wheat so that it's not going to be as even as just 1/24. And actually, this is going to end up being more strict because the seeds are going to be, when they grow, they take up more space. And so you can't just use 1/24. And also, we're going to have the same problem when you're going to start to mix this fast one in, like flax. Then you're also going to have a problem. So the qualification gets expanded on. And Rabbi Shimon says, just as they were stringent with regards to garden plants, where you have a small amount that gets mixed in, and then you're going to try to throw a seah of seed for the Beit Seah. And it says that, so did they say to be lenient with regard to seeds, of which a large amount is sown in a Beit Seah. And therefore flax, again, that's going to be that fast category that's planted 3 times more densely than wheat in this medium category. It says, therefore flax mixed in with grain also combines to forbid the mixture when it amounts to 1/24th of what is sown in the Beit Seah, although it is much more than a rova. Now, this is not going to be the halacha l'maisa. Halacha l'maisa is going to look different when we get to part 2 of this Gemara. But basically, the way it's going to end up looking is that they're going to say, look, because you have 23 rovaim of wheat and 1 rova of spelt, and let's say, flax, and you take it down to just a little bit under, and then you add a little bit more wheat. Say you take down 1% of the flax, and you add 1% wheat, so that you have just under, let's say, 3% instead of 4%. So it will look like if it's the same category, it should be nullified. Normally it would be nullified if both were the same category. So if you had wheat and spelt, would that be nullified at 3%? Yeah, you took it down under 1/24th, no problem. But over here, the halacha l'maisa is going to be, no, that's not the case, because these ones pack in so densely, you're going to actually have to remove a total of 3%, since these grow at 3 times the rate. So you're going to have to, instead, so again, you have 4.16% of this mixture is going to be flax. And you take it down a little bit, and you add a little bit. Could you normally, in a normal case where it's going to be seeds of the same kind, nullify it? Yes. But over here, because this packs in so densely, you have to take out 3 times as much and pack back in 3 times the amount of wheat in order to nullify it. So what would you have to do? You would have to take out, if you have 1 rova of flax, you'd take out just over 3% of the flax, and you'd have to add in 3% of the wheat to get it to nullify. Okay, that's not going to be 1/24th. Why? Because when you actually throw it, these end up being, taking up, they're very small seeds, and they end up being planted more densely together. And in order to clean it up, where you can end up still nullifying it and ending up with a Beit Seah of seed that can be thrown with a Seah of seed that you have in your hand, you have to get it so that it all mathematically evens out to be planted at the same rate. So that's not going to be like what Rabbi Shimon is saying, but in practicality in the halacha, that's what's going to be happening. Now, I want to point out something from Rabbi Akiva Eger before we get into the Gemara, and he has just this really brilliant chiddush that I've been marveling at. Now, Rabbi Akiva Eger is trying to look at the difference between this kind of problem that we're dealing with, a mixture of 2 different kinds of seeds, and the difference between if you have shatnez. Shatnez is going to be a mixture of wool and linen. And the idea from Rabbi Akiva in his Chuvos in Seif 218, by the way, you can see this echoed in Bavli Nida 61b. And it's talking about over there the laws of shatnez, and the laws over there in Bavli is talking about if you have a single woolen thread and it gets woven into a linen garment and you can't find the woolen thread, the entire garment is forbidden. And the insight by Rabbi Akiva Eger is that although the single woolen thread is far outnumbered by the linen threads, it doesn't get nullified. And why is that? That's because the nullification applies only in a case where you have a mixture of forbidden objects. And that forbidden objects gets mixed in with permissible ones. And so in the case of shatnez, both the linen and the wool are intrinsically allowed, but they're forbidden when they become mixed together. Now, in the case of the 2 species of grain, that's not going to nullify each other. Rather, they're going to combine to make a prohibition. So I'm allowed to throw wheat and I'm allowed to throw spelt, right? And if they do get mixed together, in certain cases, as long as it's not, the majority is not too big an amount, I can throw that seed. The only problem is it becomes, it does not nullify each other, but it combines to make a prohibition. And following that logic, we see here with Kilayim that, one species should not be capable of nullifying the other species. And really what they're doing is they're combining to create a forbidden mixture. And that's the insight. That's the difference between shatnez and this. And I think that's a beautiful insight before we get into it. So the Gemara is saying that we have these this ruling, this taught from the Mishnah. It says any Seah of seed in which there's a rova of different kind, one must reduce. However, there's a teacher of Bryces who teaches an alternate version. It says that any Seah of seed into which a rova of different kind fell, one must reduce. So the Gemara is going to explain the significance of these 2 different versions. And again, we're going to be getting into an insight by Rabbi Kanievsky on this. So Rabbi Mana says that according to the one who says in which there is, so the amount of foreign seed that forbids the mixture is 1/24th of the mixture. And according to the one who says into which fell, the amount of foreign seed that forbids a mixture is 1/25th of the mixture. Now, Rabbi Kanievsky, in the parallel to this over in Maseket Peah, where you're having these things mixed together, his insight is going to be that it's actually 2 different halachot. That the 1/25th is going to be from within, without, and that's going to be one halacha. And the other one is going to be a different halacha. So if you have, let's say you went to the shuk and you bought the seed, and you look at the seed, you open up the package, you look at it, and you see that 1/24th of this mixture is a different seed. It's visible. Well, that's going to be where that foreign seed is going to forbid the mixture. You have to lower it down just under 1/24th. But in the other case, let's say you're at the shuk buying the seed, and you see the seed seller. You're trying to buy wheat seed, and you see as it's falling, you see some kitniot fall into it. Again, we see that those are planted at the same rate. The plants take up about the same size. And you see, oh no, this mixture that I'm buying, you've mixed in this other seed. What do I do? Well, that's going to be a different halacha. So now in order to clean it, we're going to be looking at a measurement of 1/25th. You're going to have to reduce it by 1/25th of the mixture. And again, it has to do with the idea of things from without and things from within. And you can see that also when you have to fix an accidental case where you've accidentally eaten truma. You've actually eaten, food that belongs to the Goan. That's going to be a case where it says a fifth. You have to add a fifth penalty, but actually it's going to be 25% more. It actually ends up being 25%. So that's basically what they're talking about. They're saying that really, practically speaking, there's two different cases that happen here. One is going to be where, let's say you purchase the seed and you see that the mixture was already done. The other case is going to be something where the mixture is already happening. It's already occurring where this seed is pouring into it. So, as Rabbi Kanievsky is pointing out, that from his Beur Halacha, that basically you're going to have to take out different amounts to fix it in these two different cases. And so that's why there's two different versions, according to Rabbi Kanievsky, is teaching two different laws with two different measures. The Gemara continues about this and says that Rabbi Yossi, son of Rabbi Bun, says whether according to the one who says that in which there is, or according to the one who says into which fell, the amount of foreign seed that forbids a mixture is 1/24th of the mixture. So what then is the difference between the two versions? So if you have, mathematically speaking, where this one's falling in and you're trying now to remove just over 1/24th, in some cases it can end up mathematically being 1/25th parts. That's one part of what they're trying to say. And that, again, ends up being the same like when you're trying to fix eating truma or something like that accidentally and you have to reimburse them. So the amount of foreign seed that forbids a mixture is going to be 1/24th of the mixture. And what's the difference between the two versions? According to the one who says in which there is, the Tana deals with two types of seed that became mixed in with each other when they were detached. So this insight by Rabbi Yosef, son of Rabbi Bun, is a little bit different. He's saying that we're dealing with two different kinds of planting. One is going to be where it's before harvesting, and one is going to be after harvesting. So the other Tana is going to say into which fell. This Tana is dealing with two types of seed that became mixed while they were attached to the ground. So the Bryce is dealing with a case where you have a foreign species. It gets mixed as a result of falling into a field that's sown with a majority species, and the two species grew and they were harvested. So a mixture gets obtained when you're actually harvesting it. You have 23 revi'im of the majority seed and a rova of the foreign type. And according to both versions, the law would be the same, that the mixture can be sown provided there's less than 1/24th of the seed. Now, nafal is going to be fell. And according to this way, basically what it's saying is that there's other people that explain it to say that one can be where you have a mixture of detached seeds that were already harvested, and one case could be where you're looking at the plants before you're harvesting. One's when you're looking at it after you're harvesting. And once you've detached the seeds, if the seeds were originally mixed for consumption, and then the owner comes and decides to plant them, then you might have a problem. So there's some differences, and also there's some differences with how the Rosh is going to understand this. So one way, like how the Rosh is going to be looking at this, is that the two versions are differing only as to how the mixture came into being. And according to one way of looking at it, the detached seeds of the two species became mixed, and according to the other version, the two species are growing together in the same field and are then getting harvested together. So that's another case where, perhaps, maybe to clean this up, maybe at the end of the day, you might need two different ways to do that. But, again, we want to look at what is the halacha l'maisa in each individual case, because certainly if you've already harvested it or you're about to harvest it, you might end up with the same quantity or different quantity. It's hard to know. But we see here that the Mishnah is dealing with detached seeds that became mixed, and the primary thing that we're dealing with is also like, okay, you bought the seed from the shuk, and now you want to go and plant it, and you're worried about this foreign mixture. And so that's basically what we're going to be dealing with. And the Gemara says, what case are we dealing with? That if with one in which he intended at the time, and he mixed the seeds to plant them, and then even if he mixed one kernel of wheat, he's forbidden to plant the mixture. So let's say you have an accident, right? And they accidentally fall into each other. Okay, you can use this type of tool to start trying to fix the seed that you're going to be planting. But what they're trying to say is, even if you have one wheat seed that gets mixed into a seah of seed of barley, and it's just one wheat seed, it's going to forbid the whole thing if you did it on purpose. So yes, even one kernel is going to forbid the entire mixture. And the idea is that this Mishnah is only permitting the presence of foreign seed when it's going to be an accident. That's one of the key ideas here. Now, the Gemara says, if he intended to mix the seeds in order to sell them to others, this similarly cannot be the case. We're talking about the mixture, because even a tiny amount, says this Gemara, may not be mixed with a particular variety if he wants to sell it. In other words, even if you're mixing in a tiny amount, like just a couple of seeds, it forbids the whole thing. Why? Because it's dishonest. You're not allowed to do it. So we're talking about something, again, that happened accidentally, and the Gemara is going to try to provide support for this assertion. And it says that Rabbi Yaakov bar Acha and Rabbi Abba bar Chia said in the name of Rav, one who removes pebbles from his fellow's pile of wheat kernels thereby decreases the volume, and he must give him quality wheat in their stead to make up for the loss in the amount of wheat he has to sell. Now, that's a big hiddush. So sometimes when they're harvesting the wheat, little rocks and little pebbles will mix in. So let's say I'm at the shuk and I'm trying to buy some wheat seed, good quality wheat seed to plant for my seah of land, right? So I want to buy a seah of seed for my Beit Seah of land, and I open up the package and I see pebbles. So what happens now if there's going to be more than 1/24 pebbles? Well, over here, let's say if I take some of the pebbles out and I return it, and I say, okay, there's too many pebbles. I took some pebbles out, and now the measure is going to be less than a seah. Rav is coming and saying that you have to now pay for or add the amount of wheat that you took out as pebbles. That's a big hiddush. So the Gemara is going to continue and say, Rabbi Yossi said that this tells us that the owner may not mix pebbles or other impurities with the grain he sells. For if you'll say that it is permissible to mix the impurities in the grain, why do we require him to give quality wheat instead? In other words, let him return the pebbles to the pile of the grain or replace it with less expensive grain. But what they're basically trying to say is we can see that the seller may not add any impurities or seeds of different kinds to the grain he's offering for sale. These, again, are going to be accidentally put in or accidentally in there when they're harvesting, but it makes up the total amount that he's allowed to sell. Now, even if you have, say, 1/48 of the amount being pebbles, and, again, you can't add them on purpose, but the point over here is that he's allowed to sell them because it's nullified. The idea is that it's nullified. That's the key idea. And now if you're taking out that amount that, again, is going to be less than 4%, and you've taken out some of these pebbles, and you try to return it and go back to the seller, well, you've damaged him because now, in halacha, it was nullified. You've taken that out, and you've returned something that you purchased as a seah of seed, and you've returned less than a seah of seed. Rav is saying you have to pay him back. But everybody agrees that you can't add pebbles on purpose or anything like that. This is really just a Talmudic point to try to point out that there is a law of nullification. At a certain point, something can get nullified. That's the key idea. It's going to continue. And there's another inquiry. It says, if someone agreed to sell his fellow quality wheat that may have some impurities, and after completing the sale, the merchandise is found to be clean wheat that's free of any impurities, the question is, may the seller deduct the rova of impurities that we would expect to have in a seah of quality wheat? In other words, he's stipulating that he has quality wheat, and instead he's buying clean wheat. Clean wheat has no impurities. And quality wheat can have some impurities, okay? Two different kinds of wheat. So the question is that, does the purchaser, still accept up to one rova of impurities per seah? And accordingly, let's say you're buying the quality wheat. Can we expect to receive, how much impurity can we expect to receive in there? And the Gemara is basically asking whether the seller can supply one seah of quality wheat that has in there some of the clean wheat, and then deduct a rova from the seah he's making up to supply. So not only does the buyer not lose out on the deal, he's also being spared the bother of cleaning the wheat before it gets ground up and made into bread. So this Gemara is going to get resolved, and the words of the rabbis cited above indicate that he may not deduct the rova. For Rabbi Yaakov bar Acha and Rabbi Abba bar Chia said in the name of Rav, one who removes pebbles from his fellow's wheat must give him quality wheat instead. Now, what's going to be quality wheat? That's going to be with some impurities there. So if you're taking out wheat that has some impurity, you have wheat that has some impurities, and you take some of the impurities out. Rav is saying that you have to give him the quality wheat, which has the impurities, and replace it. So if you're taking out, you're trying to fix this, right? And the idea is that you're going to go return it back to the store, okay? And you've taken out half of the rova of wheat, so 1/48 of the amount, 2%, taking those out as pebbles. Rav says that, and the rabbis agree, that you have to return back 2% of the quality wheat. Not 2% of the pebbles, 2% of the quality wheat. That basically is showing that clean wheat is not reckoned to be more expensive than quality wheat. Even when supplying quality wheat, a complete seah must be supplied. So what this is trying to show is that somebody who's removing impurities from the merchant's grain is considered to have caused damage to the grain. That's the idea. And so when the wheat was cleaned of the impurities, the value is reduced. And so if you're trying to return it, you're ending up returning a smaller amount. Why? Because, again, it's a Talmudic point. He had part of it get nullified. Now, there's another question on the impurities of grain. And in the case in which the buyer removed 1 rova and a half of impurities from the seah he purchased. So again, 1 rova is going to be 1/24 of the seah. And that's going to be the limit. 1/24 is going to be where you start to get into this idea of nullification. Now, what happens if you have a rova and a half, right? So that's going to be about 6% instead of the 4%. So you have in there 22.5 revaim of clean grain. And again, we have two distinctions. We have clean grain, we have quality grain. Quality grain is going to have some impurities. Clean grain is already sifted, doesn't have those pebbles. So again, you have 22.5 revaim of clean grain. So that is going to basically be 94%. The question is, may he deduct the value of the rova from the price he must pay? And in other words, this grain was found to contain a larger percentage of impurities than usual. And the question is, here we have a case where the buyer decided to remove them from his purchase, and then he decides to go back and return it. So this is a maloket between two Amorim, Rabbi Hanina and Rabbi Mana. By the way, these are going to be the two Rosh Yeshivas of Sipori. The first one was Rabbi Hanina, and the student who succeeded him was Rabbi Mana. So oftentimes one will follow the opinion of Shmuel, by the way, and one will go with the opinion of Rav. So the Gemara says Rabbi Hanina and Rabbi Mana differ on this question about the pebbles. And Rabbi Hanina says that the buyer may deduct even the value of the rova. So in other words, he's saying that, by the way, this is from the Bavli as well, that when foreign matter exceeds the permitted amount, the entire quantity of the impurities must be removed, and the volume of grain is reckoned accordingly. In other words, he's saying that you don't have to worry about nullification at, say, just 1/24th the amount. When we're looking at this, you have 6%, okay? So he's going to basically be saying, like, look, part of it's not nullified. When they give back the amount of money to return this, okay, they have to pay him back 6% of the grain, okay? Not up to 2% or just over 2%, and then the rest gets nullified. The question is, according to Rabbi Hanina and Rabbi Mana, right, you have 6% that's no good. The guy removes some pebbles, okay? He removes all the pebbles. He removes 6% of the pebbles. Now he goes to return it, okay? So one question would be, okay, well, he returned it up just under 24%. He takes out just over 2%, and, he will ask for his money back, and, is that going to be okay? The other case is going to be like, well, wait a second. No, he removes the entire 6%, and there's no nullification in there, and he's basically going to be expecting to get back as if he paid for that full amount of wheat. So Rabbi Mana says that he may not deduct the value of the rova, in other words, this amount that's going to be 1/24th. And he says that the seller can say to him, had you given the grain back to me without removing the impurities, I would have wrapped it up in a colorful cloth, made it more attractive to the potential buyer, and sold it to someone else. And the buyer would have purchased whatever he saw. So, in other words, you basically ruined him. And yes, everybody agrees that you can take out that 2% extra of impurities. Everybody's agreeing about that. The question is, what about this 4%, this one rova, this 4% that has impurities? Do you get your money back on it or not? And so Rabbi Mana is saying that you can deduct the 2% because that's going to be more than expected. But this 4%, you've damaged him because he could have gone back and resold it. And other people are going to understand that this is going to be quality wheat that has impurities in it. And this is a standard amount of impurities and pebbles that are going to be in this kind of not sifted, this is not clean wheat that we're talking about. So he's basically going to be saying that you're returning 23 rovaim, and you have to pay him now for the rova of wheat. You can't just get back all of your money. Rabbi Hanina is saying you get back all of your money. Rabbi Hanina says that you can take out the 2%, but you don't get your money back on the 4%, and you actually have to pay him 4%. That's good because you've damaged him. You could have resold it. So the Gemara is going to move on now, and it's going to get back to the different types of seed. And the Gemara says the Mishnah deals with a case where foreign seed becomes mixed accidentally as the produce is being brought into the storehouse. So are we dealing with a purposeful case? No, we see that even if you're adding in one barley seed into a pile of wheat seeds and you're doing that on purpose, that you've forbidden the entire amount. This is going to be accidental. Where can this happen? It can happen when you bring it into the storehouse. So the Gemara is going to be moving on to this garden seed and getting into that. And the Gemara says that, have we not learned in the Mishnah, in truth, they said, garden plants whose seeds are not eaten. These are going to be turnips, they're going to be carrots, they're going to be radishes. And in truth, they said, this is going to be a halacha l'moshe Sinai. So the Gemara says that they combine to forbid the mixture when they amount to 1/24th of what is sown in a Beit Seah. And on this ruling of the Mishnah, a Baraisa taught that this ruling applies, for instance, in the case of garden plants that are sown at the rate of a kav or half kav per Beit Seah. So what is a kav? That's going to be 16% of a Beit Seah. So let's say you have these very large, cabbages, right? And you can have leafy cabbages. They're very big. You throw the seed, right? And they're saying that, well, maybe it only takes up, you only need 8% of the seed to cover the Beit Seah land. Or maybe you need 16% of the seed. Why? Because these are big. And the idea is, what happens if this now gets mixed up with two different kinds of seed? What's it going to be nullified in? So the Gemara says, now is 1/24 of half a kav good for anything? So the Gemara is going to explain this. It's going to say up to this limit of 1/24 of what is sown in the Beit Seah, the sages were concerned for the appearance of wrongdoing. For the limit and beyond, in other words, less than 1/24 of what's sown in the Beit Seah, they were not concerned for the appearance of wrongdoing. So in the case of grain or kitniot, only if a full rova becomes mixed in is there a worry about the appearance of wrongdoing. But garden plants, this concern exists even if the case is an admixture of a much smaller amount. So the Gemara is answering and explaining about this, according to the Marafulda, that the basis of this prohibition of our Mishnah about this appearance of wrong is dealing with the appearance of wrongdoing, and the forbidden limit of foreign seed is not determined according to the amount of foreign seed in relation to the entire Seah, but based on the area required to sow the foreign seed in relation to the Beit Seah in which the Seah will assumably be planted. So even if you have a small amount of seed, if it's substantially enough to sow 1/24 of the field, then you're going to have to start to look at cleaning it. So again, we have three categories. We have this slow, this medium, and this fast. In other words, what they're trying to say is if you have two different kinds of the same type, so you have carrots and turnips that get mixed together, you have carrots and cabbages that get mixed together, right? Where you don't need as many seeds to plant this Beit Seah land. It's not like planting barley. And what are you doing? What happens, right? In order to clean it, you're going to have to take out 1/24 of this of the foreign seed, even though it's only going to be, say, 16% of the seed. Okay, and it's going to be the same category. If it's within the same category, it's going to be easy to clean. You take out 1/24, and it's not going to be taking out a rova of seed like you would do if it's going to be the standard type like legumes and kitniot and barley and grain, but you're still going to take out the 1/24, even though it's going to be a small amount. That's what this is trying to say. So is this going to be strict in the case of garden? Yeah, because you're going to be sitting there, you're going to have to pile up all these seeds, you're going to have to pick them out. So you take out 1/24 hand by hand with these tiny seeds. It's a lot of work, and that's how it's going to have to be done. That's going to be strict, even though there's not a lot of seeds to do, because you don't need as many seeds because these plants are pretty big. To cover the same amount of space with, say, barley or wheat, you don't need as many seeds because barley is going to be planted more densely. So again, this is trying to get into the fact that, and we have to understand this, that there's three kinds of seed here. And we have a problem when we mix up with different kinds. So if you mix up with the medium and the garden, you're going to have an issue. If you mix up within the garden, you still have to clean 1/24, and that's going to be more strict, but the amount of seed you have to take out is smaller, right? But you have to pick them out. That's going to be hard. So, and they're doing it because they have an appearance of wrongdoing issue that they're dealing with. You're not going to say, oh, it gets nullified, right? So the Mishnah teaches that if a mixture of seed contains a rova of foreign species, he must reduce the amount of foreign seed until it comprises just under 1/24 of the mixture. So the Gemara provides two ways to reduce this percentage of foreign seed in the mixture. And it says, in what way does he reduce the percentage of foreign seed? It says he either removes part of the rova of the foreign seed. So let's say he has 4%, 4.16%, that's going to be foreign seed. He takes out part away from there, or he adds onto the major component of the Seah enough of the kind to reduce the amount of foreign seed to less than 1/24. The Gemara is going to challenge the later option of adding the majority species, and Rabbi Abahu, has he not said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan regarding all prohibitions that become mixed with permissible items, thereby prohibiting the mixture, and then someone increases the amount of the permissible items so as to nullify the prohibition, and if the desired addition was made accidentally, the mixture is permitted, but if it's deliberately done, it's forbidden. In other words, he's basically saying that, look, how can you increase the amount of the major component? You're not allowed to purposefully mix seeds in. If it happens by accident, it happens by accident. So according to this teaching by Rabbi Abahu, it looks like the best way to do it is by removing the foreign seed so it gets nullified. And then if you're going to add it, you'd say, well, it's already been nullified, so I'm not doing anything wrong. But if you have in there something that's not nullified, and now you're pouring in more seed, you've poured in a prohibited thing into the mixture because it's not nullified yet. So that's going to be an issue. The Gemara is going to answer about this, and we're going to finish up. And the Gemara says there regarding the deliberate nullification prescribed by Rabbi Yochanan, you are increasing the amount of permissible items so as to nullify a biblical prohibition. However, here in the case of adding seed to permit the Kilayim prohibition, you are increasing the amount of permitted items so as to nullify a prohibition, and that is going to be because of the appearance of wrongdoing. In other words, the ban on deliberately nullifying prohibited items, that's going to be specifically on biblical prohibitions, but this mission is dealing with the sowing of a mixture that's not considered biblical Kilayim, and it's only forbidden rabbinically because of the appearance of wrongdoing. So the Gemara is ruling that such a mixture may be deliberately rendered permitted for planting even by adding to this majority seed, says the Rosh. And the Bavli, by the way, is also going to permit in Beit Seah 4b the deliberate nullification of a rabbinically prohibited item. So there's a controversy among the Rishonim whether this allowance is going to be for any prohibition or just what we're dealing with over here. And according to the opinion of most of the rabbinic people that are looking at this, that it may not be deliberately nullified. And the idea here is that rabbinic prohibitions based on the appearance of wrongdoing are considered less stringent than other prohibitions, other rabbinic prohibitions, and only with regard to this type of rabbinic prohibition does our Gemara sanction deliberate nullification. So what they're saying over here is that you do have a Marasayan problem, and you can nullify it if it's at this 1/24th amount. You can only in this case add to it. But there's other cases where you have rabbinic issues that you can't add to it. This is just going to be over here. Now, the Rambam in Hilchos Kilayim, and we're going to finish this up, rules that planting a mixture containing more than a rova of foreign seed is not merely a rabbinically decreed prohibition because of the appearance of wrongdoing, but actually is going to be derived to Kilayim. And so again, you have, say, in there, 4.16% of the seed is going to be foreign seed. Rambam is saying that if you have more than that, you go to plant it, that's going to be a deraita prohibition of Kilayim. You've planted foreign seed. And he's basically going to be saying that since the Torah prohibition of sowing Kilayim applies only if the outgrowth of what you see in the field appears to be mixed, that a mixture in which the minority component will account for 1/24th of the field is forbidden to be planted under biblical law, but a smaller concentration of foreign seed is not going to be noticeable in the field, and that's going to be permitted. So accordingly to this Gemara's answer, it could be understood like this, if you're going to follow the Rambam, that since the Kilayim prohibition depends on the outgrowth appearance to be mixed with Marasayin, thereby decreasing the percentage of foreign seed is not nullifying a prohibition, it's just avoiding it altogether by causing the foreign species to be discernible in the field, and this is not considered a violation of the ban against nullifying prohibited items. Have a great day, and we'll get more into this in part 2 of the shiur, which really is going to be covering what happens when you mix things between these 3 different categories. So stay tuned. Have a great day.